Evening, everyone.
Hello.
So I'm here to answer questions if anybody has them. Otherwise, we can go because that's really all that this second meeting is for, is just to help you guys flesh out some questions you might have on homework and things like that. So any questions? All right, well, I'll point out some things and then we can go unless anybody else shows up. These two questions are tricky and there's a lot of different interpretations. I would suggest taking a look at previous recordings and discussing them with other people because they're tricky, right? 2.7 is fairly straightforward. 2.9 is very straightforward. Things to keep in mind is when you're talking about samples and populations, you know, your sample and your population are always let's say what the right word, subjective, right? It all depends on what you're trying to learn about. So that becomes your population. And then, you know, what you're able to gather is your sample. So sometimes things can be a little vague as to what might be the population and what might be the sample. But I think both of these are pretty straightforward. I mean, for instance, you know, in 2.9, they're talking about that this article was talking about the average Yaleman class of 1924 salary, which in today's dollars, you know, would be 150,000. Times estimate was based on replies to a sample survey questionnaire mailed to those members of the Yale class of 1924 whose addresses were on file with the Yale administration in the late 1950s. So what's the survey's population of interest, right? What are they actually interested in? Well, it should be pretty obvious what the population of interest is. What do you guys think it is?
Yale's class of 1924.
Yeah, exactly. Because they're only concerned with the class of 1924. And even we could probably be more specific and say it sounds like they're only concerned with the men, right? Because the average Yale man makes me, I don't know if Yale man is just what they call all people who go to Yale. But otherwise that could be just the men at Yale, but who knows? But anyway, the class of 1924 is definitely the population of interest. And then, you know, the sample would be the people who responded to the survey. And then from there, you can, you know, go on and answer those questions. Like I said, those are pretty straightforward. 211, I think that one's pretty straightforward. Most people get that one correct. It's just a matter of understanding the difference between stratified and cluster sampling. And I always like to show, this is a great, this is my favorite picture that I think really illustrates the difference between stratified and sampling, because we're visual creatures, right? And so we learn better from pictures. And stratified sampling and cluster sampling are very similar, and students often get them confused because in both techniques, you take your population of interest and then therefore your sample, you take your sample space and you break it into subsets, right? In stratified sampling, you break them up into what are called strata. And in cluster sampling, you break them up into what are called clusters. But they're still, as you can see, they're just subgroups, right? These are just, you can see that the big outer rectangle is supposed to represent your entire sample. And then these little inner rectangles are the little subgroups. And then same thing over here, right? So you can see that they've both been subdivided into 6 subgroups or subsamples. The big difference between the two techniques is in stratified sampling, your different strata are homogeneous, right? So one strata has all of your things that you're studying. Let's say you're looking at people. So this would be all people with a certain characteristic, the black characteristic, the blue characteristic, the magenta, the green, the orange, and the red, right? And so obviously there's some sort of either one variable with 6 options, or there's 6 different kind of variables that you're looking at, that you're breaking them up amongst those, right? So you're grouping all the people together that have the black characteristic together, all the people that have the blue characteristic in this, and so on and so forth. And obviously, whatever these 6 characteristics are, there's something that they are something that you think influences what you're studying.
So, Dr. McBride, this is Madry. So,
Yeah.
One of my assistant students, when we were looking at this, when I was taking another class, the way we understood it, or the way he got me to understand it a little bit better, when you look at, say, the bottom 3. So the bottom 3, the red, the brown, and the green, the red is the high school, the brown is the middle school, and the green is the elementary.
Absolutely.
But then you have the signature schools, and so all of them are schools. But then you have the signature schools at the top. You have the high school signature school, the middle school signature, and then the elementary signature schools. So that is how they're stratified. And so he made me understand it that way. And that sticks out in my head now.
That's perfect. That's a great example, Anthony. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's exactly correct, because you're looking at each of those different types of schools, and then obviously you're studying the students within them. Yeah, fantastic. And then if we wanted to expand on that, on your example, when we cluster sample, you can see that the clusters are all heterogeneous. They're all mixed.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of looking at the individual schools, these would maybe be individual school districts, or maybe even individual counties or states. And within each of those, you would have a regular high school, a regular middle school, a regular elementary, and then a charter, right? Or, you know, the I forget what you call these ones, the
signature or the magnets.
Thank you, the signature of the magnet schools, right? Or whatever it happens to be. You'll have a mix of each in each of those, kind of like maybe a geographical clustering. They don't always have to be geographical, but you get the idea that within each of those clusters, you're going to have all of the things that you're studying, rather than just each strata having just one single thing in it. And then the big difference is, with stratified sampling, you go to every single strata and you randomly sample from amongst those strata. And you'll notice that you don't have to sample the same amount from each. You would sample the amount from each that makes it representative of the population, right? So if 20% of your population was in the Magnate High School, then you would get 20% of your sample would come from here, and so on and so forth. With cluster sampling, you just randomly choose a certain number of your clusters and then sample everything within those clusters. And that's the big difference between stratified and clustering. And that should hopefully help you answer 211, as well as 213, because 213 is also about some sampling questions. 213 gets a little trickier, I think, than 211 does, especially the Environmental Protection Agency one. People tend to get this one wrong a lot. So again, discuss it with your classmates. Go look at previous videos and you'll get some clues on that. Same thing with 216. It's pretty straightforward, but there are some some discussions, or some problems with these. They're giving different drugs to different patients in different wards in different hospitals, right? They've just broken things up all over the place, right? So you've got this new drug D1 for treating a certain illness. You've got the old drug D2, that you want to compare it to, and then of course you introduce a placebo just as a control. They go out and they I would hope, randomly choose 10 hospitals for the study, but maybe they choose the 10 hospitals because it's convenient and all they have. They do a thorough evaluation of hospitals and conclude that there may be aspects of the hospitals that may result in the elevation of responses at some of the hospitals. So in order to kind of account for that confounding variable, they have the hospital, and each hospital has 6 wards of patients. And what she's going to do, she's going to randomly select 6 patients in each ward. I kind of wish they wouldn't have done 6 twice because it kind of gets people confused, but she's just going to randomly select some patients in each of the 6 wards in each of the 10 hospitals to participate in the study. So within each hospital, 2 wards are randomly assigned to get the D1, 2 wards are randomly assigned to D2, and 2 wards are randomly assigned to the placebo. So that, you have kind of this equal distribution amongst all 10 hospitals. And what that does is it takes the confoundness of the hospitals out of it, right? So like if you have one hospital that is just, really low budget and you think they have got a really substandard of care, well, that's okay because they're not going to skew the results because you're still evenly spreading all 3, the 2 drugs and the placebo amongst that hospital. And then you go to the, the high-end hospital that's got all the money and the big, huge budget and all the fancy tools and all that kind of stuff. Again, it's not going to skew it because you're doing each in all 3. So
right, I'm sorry to cut you off. Is the confounding variable in this example the resources available at each of the hospitals?
Yeah, I mean, they're technically not asking for what the confounding variable is, but it's always a good idea to think about it whenever you're designing a study. And I think, yes, well, I think the hospitals themselves as a whole are the confounding variables, because every hospital is different. You've got a different, different nurses, different doctors, different tools. I mean, they all have MRIs and things like that, but one might have a fancier one might have a newer one might have a broken one, those kinds of things. So the hospitals themselves would definitely be confounding variables because you would expect to see a different level of care from one hospital to the next. As much as we'd love to think that all of our hospitals are equal, they are not. And some give better care than others.
So is placebo considered as one of the factors here?
Yes, very good. Yes, absolutely. Well, see, here's where it gets, so they would be considered one of the factor levels. Factors, remember, are the factor is like the name of the variable. So in this case, that would just be type of drug. Then the factor levels would be the different values that go within that variable. So under the type of drug variable, right? So you want to visualize, if I had a spreadsheet and I had all my data in my spreadsheet, I would have a column that was labeled type of drug. And then for each, ward or each patient or whatever, it would list what kind of drug they got. And so it would either say D1, D2, or placebo. Those would be the factor levels.
Okay, so the factors are okay. I thought maybe if it was the drug D1 is 20 milliliter or milligram or 40 milligram, those are the factor levels.
Well, they would be if you were giving people different levels of the same drug, then they absolutely would be factor levels.
Okay, but in this case, drug is a factor, but different D1, D2, and placebo are factor levels.
Perfect, exactly. Yes. The factor is simply the variable that's going to change from, one subject to the next. And then the factor levels are the types of changes. So like you said, in this case, they're going to get different drugs. So the factor is a drug, and then the levels are the 3 different types of drugs they get. Or if we ran the study differently and we just wanted to see if different amounts of D1, had an influence on how, good they felt or, how quickly they recovered, then the factor would just be D1. And then the factor levels would be 10 milligrams, 20 milligrams, and 30 milligrams, if those were the 3, amounts they gave to the patients.
Okay, and then the treatments here, is that the total number of treatment that is provided to patients, like let's say 10 hospital, one factor like that, or treatment is we administer two drugs and one placebo.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of vague is what they're asking for the treatments, but yeah, the treatment is their second one, where the treatments are basically just the three things they got, the D1, the D2, and the placebo. So basically the factor levels and the treatments are the exact same thing in this scenario.
Thank you.
Yep. What would the blocks be?
I put hospitals.
Very good, absolutely, because that's the first level of kind of segregation, is they break things up by hospital. Then within the hospital, right, they break it down further. The experimental units, this is where I disagree with the book. The book says wards. What do you guys think?
I put hospital because again, it's the main, it's the big hospital, and within hospital they have wards. Within the wards they have patients. So I put my measurement unit as patient because we are examining each patient, and experimental unit as hospital.
Okay, so you're close. You forgot the difference between an experimental unit and measurement unit. The experimental unit is the thing that you're taking measurements from, and the measurement unit is simply the unit of measure that you're measuring. So if you're measuring all the patient's height in inches, the experimental unit would be patients, and the measurement unit would simply be inches.
Okay, because I was going by an example in the book where they were saying the container is the experimental unit, and because we are measuring every fish inside the container, that is the measurement unit.
In that example, what kind of measurement were you? Just counting how many fish there were, or were you actually measuring every fish?
Measuring every fish. I don't remember exactly what they were measuring, but they were measuring every fish in that example.
But here's the question, if you can remember, in that example, were they recording the individual measurements of the fish, or were they more concerned of the cumulative thing? So like this container had a total of 35 pounds of fish and I weighed each pound, or I took the length of each fish and then I said there was a total length of this in this container, or an average length of this in this container.
Okay, I'm going back to the book, and so I'm still confused. Then in that case, I did not understand completely what is the difference between experimental unit and measurement unit.
The only reason why those two scenarios would be different is if you're measuring each individual fish, and then you're recording each of those measurements, and you're thinking of each fish as an individual subject. Like when you think about doing an experiment, you have subjects, right? And so if we would here, let me just bring up a visual aid.
Good evening.
Evening, Francisca.
Yeah, I just got in. I'm at work, and I just have to log in. I'm having a lot of problem trying to. I don't have access to the PowerPoints, to the slides, and I got in touch with the help desk, and they're trying to do something that is still not working.
Can you not get to the Google Drive? Because everybody in the world can get to the Google Drive.
Okay.
So which class are you in? H1 or H2? Well, it doesn't matter. If you just go to the announcements, and you'll see that there's one labeled Google Drive Access. And if you click on that, there's a link right here. Takes you to our Google Drive folder. And in that Google Drive folder is a thing called PowerPoints. And there are the copies of all the PowerPoints. Yeah, so somebody just put the link in the chat box. Okay, so I would suggest you read all the announcements. Everything you need are in those. All right, so back to the example I was showing is that, if you're, let's say you've got subject, and then, for fish, you've got weight, and then maybe you've got container, right? And so you're talking about subject 1, subject 2, subject 3, subject 4, subject 5, right? That's each individual fish. And then, 3 pounds, 2.5 pounds, 4 pounds, 3.5 pounds, and so on and so forth, 5 pounds. And then these were all in container A. If this was what your data looked like, right? If this was how you were kind of keeping and recording your data, then the experimental unit is the fish, because each line, right? Each line of data in your spreadsheet represents each individual thing that's being measured. So that's each of your experimental units. So just in this case, it would just be fish. And then the measurement unit in this case would be their weights, because, or actually it would be, you could either say weight or you could say, pounds, right? Pounds or ounces, because it's technically the actual unit of measure. So really the most precise answer would be fish for experimental unit, and pounds or ounces or whatever for measurement unit. Now, if instead this one was gone and you were looking at, you would go into each container and you would take out all of the fish and you would weigh all of the fish, and then you would record the total weight in each container. Then the container becomes the experimental unit, and the unit of measure is still pounds. So that's the difference, right? It basically comes down to, how does each row of data in your spreadsheet break down, right? What does one row represent? And whatever that one row represents, that's your experimental unit. Full stop. That's the easiest way to think about it. So whatever your row is, that's your experimental unit. And then whatever unit of measure you're using to measure those things, that becomes your measurement unit. And you can have multiple measurement units, right? So if you measure their weight, their height, their age, you're going to have multiple measurement units for each of those variables. So that's what's going on here. In this particular instance, the book says the experimental unit is wards, but that would mean that they weren't really keeping track of the individual patient data. They were just keeping track of what happened in each ward, which from the description doesn't sit with me. I think the experimental unit should be patients, because it quite clearly talks about how they are, right, measuring patients. All 6 patients in each wards will be given the same treatment. And then age, BMI, blood pressure, and a measure of degree of illness are recorded for each patient. So you could argue that the wards are the experimental units because each ward is given the exact same factor level, right? One ward is given D1, one ward is given D2, one ward is given D3. So that's how you could argue that the wards are the experimental units. And then, the things that you're measuring are the measurement units. So, for age, it'd be years. For BMI, I guess it's just BMI. For blood pressure, I don't know what it is. It's some sort of pascals or something like that. And then degree of illness would just be degree of illness. But you could also argue that the individual patients are the experimental units, since you're technically measuring on them, right? So either answer is correct, and I would accept either answer. I just want you guys to be able to argue effectively for either answer. Vandana.
So what you are saying is, since we are measuring, or maybe I'm just going back what I'm thinking. So according to, again, I'm going back to the book, and
Yep.
according to the book, the experimental unit is the physical entity to which the treatment is randomly assigned.
Correct. So why wouldn't that be patient? Because you're assigning a different drug to each patient. Or you could argue that it's the ward because each ward is being assigned one specific drug. But
Right.
you could not argue hospitals because the hospitals are not assigned one drug. Every hospital is getting all three drugs.
Okay, got it. Okay, got it. So since the ward is we are measuring the patient should be experimental unit.
I think so, yeah. I think you could honestly argue either way. And the only reason why you could argue that the ward is the experimental unit is, again, because the wards are homogeneous, right? Each ward is getting one and only one drug. All 6 patients in a ward are getting the same drug. So you can kind of think of them as one entity getting a drug. It just so happens that one entity is made up of 6 patients. So that's why I think you could easily argue that the ward is the experimental unit, but you could also easily argue that the patients are the experimental unit, since they're the actual physical thing that is getting the treatment, right? You're not giving the drug to the ward, you're technically giving the drug to the patient inside the ward, right? So you could argue either one for sure. But those are the only 2 that could be logically argued as an experimental unit. And it doesn't matter which one you choose, the measurement unit is still the same for both. And it's degree of illness. Because that's what we're studying, that's what we care about. Yes, they measured their age, their BMI, and their blood pressure, but we don't care about those. Those are actually covariates. Those would be, what you would think about as almost confounding variables, but what they call covariates here. Good point, Sheena, that it's only 6 patients within the wards. It's not the entire ward getting the drug. So that would strengthen the argument for patients, which, and I'm not swaying you guys, but I always thought patients was the better of the 2 answers. The book says wards. So basically what I've done is I've tried to find a logical argument for why the book says wards. And I think I found one that's pretty good, but I agree with you, Sheena, that I think patients is a stronger argument. I think you could argue for patients being the experimental unit more strongly than you could wards. But you absolutely could not make an argument for hospitals because of the mix, right? So as I said, measurement unit is going to be degree of sickness. Your replications can be kind of confusing in the context of this. Remember, you have 10 hospitals. Each hospital has 6 wards, and 2 wards, 2 of each getting a drug, right? So 2 D1 wards, 2 D2 wards, and 2 placebo wards. So those are basically your replications, talking about that you've got the 60 different wards. But when we talk about replications, it's kind of like, it's not that you've got 60 total wards. It's that you've got, so we're studying the drugs. So how many times is each drug replicated? So in this case, each drug goes to 2 wards in each of the 10 hospitals. So those would be your replications, the 2 wards, that get a drug. So the 2 wards per drug in each of the 10 hospitals. That's how we would classify replications. Because it's, when we talk about replications, it's more about how is each aspect of your study replicated. So, how do you replicate the placebo? How do you replicate the D1? How do you replicate the D2? And if we were doing something else, right, if we were studying something else, like if we were studying the different ways that people feel after doing yoga versus meditation versus, you know, ASMR versus a placebo, then the idea would be, you know, the replications would be how many different ways do people get the yoga treatment? How many different ways, you know, do people get the ASMR treatment? How many different ways do people get the meditation treatment? And how many different ways do people get the placebo treatment? That's how that's the idea of replications is basically you're looking at your factor levels and then asking how is each factor level replicated, right? And our factor levels were D1, D2, and placebo. And so replications is how is each of those replicated? Well, each of those drugs goes into 2 wards in each of the 10 hospitals for technically a total of 20 replications, right? For each thing. We talked about covariates and then we talked about treatments. So that's 216. That one, it can be a little tricky to interpret, I think. So here is 2.22. I should have put this somewhere else. Shouldn't have given away the.
So I have a question here.
Yeah.
2.22. Is this the different thickness of the glaze that is applied on the same part? So like one part will get one part will get 1 layer of the glaze, the other part will get the 2 layers of the glaze. Is that what it is? Or is it?
So I think every pot is getting different glazes and different thicknesses, right? You can't give one pot 2 glazes, nor can you give one pot 2 thicknesses.
Right. So it's
each,
the thickness of the glaze, right? It's the thickness of the glaze because not
and
the
the 4
part
different,
is okay. Yeah.
yeah. So there are going to be 8 different factors, 8 different total factors, because you've got 4 glazes at 2 different thicknesses. So you can think of it like if your 4 glazes are labeled A, B, C, D, you've got A thick, A thin, B thick, B thin, right? C thick, C thin, and D thick, D thin.
Right.
So somebody just asked about, again, back up at the previous one. Replications, covariates, and treatments. Replications is how each of your factor levels is replicated. Each of your factor levels are the 3 different drugs, D1, D2, and the placebo. Each of those is given to 2 wards in 10 hospitals. So that's replications. Covariates are the things that are measured that might affect your outcome. It's kind of like confounding variables, only confounding variables are usually things that aren't measured. We know they're there, but we can't measure them. We just have to try and account for them. And we usually account for them by how we set up our samples. i.e. in this case, we talked about how the hospitals themselves would probably be confounding variables because you're going to get a different level of care in each hospital. But by taking each hospital and equally, you basically did a stratified sample, right? Where you stratified each of the wards and then each ward was homogeneous, right? So each ward got, D1, D2, or the placebo, and you replicated that twice in each hospital. So you had 2 wards that got D1, 2 wards that got D2, 2 wards that got the placebo in each hospital. And by doing that, you have pretty much eliminated the confounding variable of the difference in level of care that you would get from one hospital to the next. Covariates are similar to confounding variables in that they will influence the apparent effect of each of your factor levels, right? Because I mean, the whole reason why we're doing experiments is to see if we get a different effect from each of our factor levels. And the effect is the thing that we're measured. So in this case, degree of illness and how fast they recover from it, right? And so our 3 factor levels are D1, D2, and placebo. And we're just basically trying to figure out if one works better than the other. Well, confounding variables are things that will affect that measurement, right? Things that will cause one of your experimental units to show a different measure than another that might make you think it was due to the factor level when in fact it was due to something else. I.e., if they're in the better hospital, they might recover faster, which would make you think that that drug was actually working better than the other drug. If one hospital got one drug and another hospital got another drug, that would be a bad design, because if all of these patients in hospital A were recovering faster, you would think, oh, well, that drug is better, but it could just be that that hospital was better, right? That's a confounding variable. A covariate is something that we can measure that can also affect the outcome that we're measuring, right? So we're trying to figure out how fast somebody gets over this illness. Well, obviously someone's age has a huge effect on how quickly or slowly they recover. Obviously somebody's BMI has a huge effect on how sick somebody gets and how fast they recover, as does your blood pressure, right? Blood pressure is a very strong indicator of health. You know, high blood pressure has a lot of comorbidities with it. So those 3 things are something that we can measure at the experimental unit level, i.e. we can measure them on each of our patients, and therefore we can try to control for those influences. Because when we get these certain patients that just don't recover, they're much more severe in their illness, and they take much longer to recover, we can go and look at those patients and go, oh, well, look at them. They all have high BMI. They all have high blood pressure, right? So we know that those are covariates, and that's why we measure them. So yes, that's what G would be the age, the BMI, and the blood pressure. And then treatments, as I said before, and it's going to be your factor levels. That's all it is. It's the exact same thing as factor levels. All right, so that's that one. The rest are pretty straightforward. In fact, very straightforward. 2.22, I think, is pretty easy once you start looking at it. I mean, the difference between a completely randomized design, a randomized complete block design, or a Latin square design, I think when you read this, it'll be pretty obvious that it could only be one of the two, that one of them is eliminated right off the bat. And then if you look more closely at the actual specifics of the layout, you're able to eliminate the third one, and then it becomes very obvious that it has to be one of the 3. I shouldn't say very obvious, because then it makes people think that they're an idiot if they can't figure it out. But it is pretty obvious when you start looking at the specifics of the experiment. And when you look at the specifics of the definitions of these 3 things, right? So really look at, so when you're looking at these 3 things, try to pay attention to how they differ. They're all going to have similarities. So then ask yourself, how do they differ? What are the major differences between the 3? And if you can identify the 3 major differences, that will make it really easy to then see which one applies to this scenario and how the other 2 don't because of their differences. The bakery one, again, there's been some good discussion about this in the past, but I think once you start really looking at the 2 designs, you can see why one works better than the other. So it'd be great if you guys, just kind of discuss these ideas in your doctoral dialogue. And then the last one's pretty straightforward. All right. So any questions?
I have a quick question, Dr. McBride.
Yes.
I think I read that you said if we submit our homework to you early for
Mhm.
you to review, as long as we get it to you by Friday, is that Friday morning or just by the end of the day, Friday?
Friday morning. If you go
Okay.
to the, I believe I gave you guys till 9 a.m. Eastern time Friday.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I believe I put it in the directions for the assignment.
Dr. McBride, I thought you told us 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, which would be 9 a.m. for me, but this is Madry speaking again.
Oh, I put it in the announcements. Here it is. How to get 100%. 9 a.m. Eastern time.
Oh, geez.
Yep. So 9 a.m. Eastern time Friday, if you want me to look at it early. Anything that is submitted by that point, I will go in Friday morning. I will go into grades. I will click on, homework 1, which will take me into speed grader. And I'll basically just grade your assignment. And I will literally give it a grade. I will go through here and I'll mark everything that's wrong. I'll give you some notes as to what's wrong, why it's wrong, and what you need to think about. I'm not going to just tell you what the answer is. I'm going to tell you what you need to think about to fix it. And then I'll give you a grade, right? And, if you're happy with the grade, then you don't have to do anything. But if you want to improve the grade, then you have to look at my notes, make the fixes, and then submit it with the fixes, right? So resubmit the paper with the wrong answer and then the right answer underneath it, like in a separate color or bold or something. So I can very quickly skim through it and go, all right, this was one that was wrong. Here's their correction. Yeah, it's correct. I can give you more points, that kind of thing. I don't want to have to grade the whole damn thing over again. No, it's not due tomorrow morning. It's due Sunday at midnight. If you want me to look at it ahead of time and kind of pre-grade it to let you know what you got right and what you got wrong so you can fix it and therefore get 100%, hopefully, that's due tomorrow morning at 9.
Okay.
I feel like a lot of you aren't reading my announcements because you wouldn't have these questions if you read my announcement. Not you, Anthony, but people in the chat box are asking things that really you need to read the announcements, people. Okay, what about tomorrow at 9? There's nothing tomorrow at 9 p.m., Vladimir. 9 a.m. Eastern time, Friday, if you want it looked at. And it's midnight Eastern time on Sunday is when it's actually due. So again, if you read the announcements, it's all in here. 9 a.m. Eastern time, Friday morning each week. If you want me to look at it and review it once before it gets its final grade. Think of it as like sending it to your editor or your proofreader before you submit it for publication, right? So you're submitting it for to your proofreader early, 9 a.m. Eastern time. Your proofreader, me, is going to look it over, tell you what everything you got wrong, so you can make adjustments and fix it before you turn it in for your deadline, which is Sunday at midnight. Okay, any other questions?
So our weekly class is on Monday and Thursday, right? At 7 p.m.
That's what it is right now. Yes. I mean, obviously we'll have to move the 25th because that's Thanksgiving.
Okay.
So that one would probably be Wednesday. No, you cannot. Vladimir.
Dr. McBride,
Yes.
I thought we are meeting on, you mentioned Sundays and Thursdays, but you said this week it will be Monday. Now coming, because this Sunday you're occupied, you have a conflict. So you're not meeting this Sunday, it will be Monday. Then after this Monday will be like Sundays and Thursdays. That's what I read in your latest email.
Did I write that wrong in my email?
I think it was you mentioned both that majority said Monday and Thursday. You think the best time is Sunday and Thursday, and we will meet on Monday and Thursday. So I think that was a little bit confusion in your announcement.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the last email says Sundays and Thursdays, but you have conflict this Sunday. So for this Sunday will be Monday. Then
Oh,
after this
yeah.
Monday will be Sundays and Thursdays.
Oh, yeah, that's yeah, I wrote this late at night.
Yeah, that was the latest email.
That is confusing. I apologize.
Because it says Sunday and Monday tied. There was a tie for Sunday, Monday.
Yeah, because if you go to I put them in the calendar for you guys. If you go to the
Yeah.
calendar.
Yeah.
uh,
Because I
But you
think
did say you reserved the right to screw this up again. So I mean, I'm good with it.
I did, yes, absolutely. So yeah, you can see in the calendar, I've got Mondays and Thursdays, except for Thanksgiving.
so no longer Sundays.
No, Mondays and Thursdays. So I apologize. You're right. That email would I miswrote in the email. It's supposed to be Mondays and Thursdays. Those are the best days. Academic.
Can we change the timing? Can the timing be, can
Well,
we?
I would love to accommodate you, but it's a class of 18 people, and these are the times that the majority of the people wanted. So I just went with what everybody wanted. There were, out of 18 people, 11 people could make it at 7 o'clock. So that's why I chose 7 o'clock. If you can't make it at 7 o'clock, just watch the videos, guys. I mean, that's as you can see. I don't know if you can see how many people are here right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are literally 8 people in this Zoom session right now. There are 18 people in the class. So more than half the people didn't even show up. Now, is that because they couldn't or because they didn't want to? I don't know. And honestly, I don't care. It doesn't bother me to show up or not show up. You're not going to offend me if you don't show up. But I can't make everybody happy. I can only try and accommodate the largest portion of people possible. And 11 people voted for 7 o'clock on Thursdays and 7 o'clock on Mondays, as well as 7 o'clock on Sunday and 7 o'clock on Wednesday. So those times were the best times for the majority of the class. Not everybody, right? There was one student who couldn't make it at all ever. So there's nothing I could do for her. She's just going to have to watch the videos, right? So if you can't make it, sorry, I'm doing my best, guys. I can't be available 24/7. It's the best I can do. So you're gonna have to watch the videos. I think that's fair. I hope you guys agree. I mean,
Well, I'm good with it, Dr. McBride, especially the part that you reserve the right to screw this up again. So I'm good with all of it.
thank you, sir. I think you understand me.
I just like the part that you reserve the right to screw it up. I'm good.
Yeah. I always have to put that disclaimer. I'm getting old, getting sloppy.
No, I mean, I just stole that from you this week. So
Did you?
I'm adding that to a lot of my documentation now.
Nice. Very good. All right, guys, if there's no more questions, I say we adjourn, and I will see you guys all Monday at 7 for week 2 with the new material. Make sure that, what you need to do this week is Unit 1 homework and get enrolled in SAS, right? If you're going to use SAS, make sure that you get your account up and running and you get all your data uploaded so that next week you can hit the ground running, because next week we're actually going to start computing some things, right? This week was all vocabulary junk and we didn't do anything with any numbers. Next week we will be doing things with numbers. Okay. Questions before we go? Francisca?
Yes.
Yeah, just you're off mute. Do you have a question?
No, I was just concerned with the I'm just the schedule is not working for me. It will not work for me. So, and
Well, I'm sorry. I wish I could help.
and I was also I read your announcements and I didn't get the detail about, because all you told me, when I emailed you, you mentioned that I should try this, and I tried those and it didn't work, clearing my cache and cleaning my cache and getting in touch with the help desk.
What can you not do? I'm sorry, I don't remember. What is it that you can't access?
Okay, I will go back and see what I can do. So,
No, what I'm saying is,
I can't access the classes, the PowerPoints.
I'm sorry, you can't, what can't you access?
Oh, sorry.
You're breaking up. What is it?
Sorry. My daughter was calling me. Are you hearing me now?
Yes.
Okay.
So what is it you can't access?
No, I said the classes, the unit preparation slides. We are not, we are telling me I don't have access to it. So I've been working with the help desk, and they found out that I don't actually have access, and they emailed, they're working on it. So right now I've not viewed them. I've not been able to view
Did you try and reach them? How did you try and get to them?
I tried different things. I got help. Somebody was helping me to get access. Then I started working with the help desk today, and they couldn't still help me get access to it.
So
they said they will get back to me.
I'm sorry. I think you misunderstand what I'm saying. Where inside the classroom? So on what web page? Where did you go in the class to try and get to the slides?
I went to the unit preparation under the courses, and I go to the modules, and went to the unit preparation. I went to the assignment section, and whenever I go and click those, and I don't have access to them. I have access.
You mean you don't have access to these videos?
Not all of them. The unit 1 preparation. I don't. Those videos, I don't have access to them. They don't open for me. Yeah, they are not playing.
Okay, so I'm sorry. I thought you said you didn't have access to the lecture slides, not the videos. So I misunderstood.
No, I mean the videos.
Okay.
The videos, yes.
Yeah.
I don't have. It's not opening for me. I don't know whether other people have the same problem I do.
Well, if it's the SAS ones you can't get in, that's okay. Those don't matter. Just make sure you can watch these, because these are the ones that teach you about the topics. The SAS stuff is not important at all. So if you can't get these, I wouldn't bother. Really, I wouldn't. It's not worth your headache. I mean, by all means, talk to IT and see if they can figure out why, for some strange reason, your account is not given access to them. But if they can't get it resolved, don't waste a lot of time on that. It's not, you don't need it at all for this week, and you really don't need it at all for anything. Because if you just go and watch some of my videos from the Google Drive, I show you guys how to upload your data and do everything you need to do in SAS anyway. So that's all you really need, is how to get your account and how to upload your data. That's all you need to worry about this week.
Hey, Francesca, I can access the video from the Unit 1 preparation, but I cannot access the videos in the Unit 1 homework. And those are the same as Unit 1 preparation.
Okay.
The SAS video from the Unit 1 homework are the same as Unit 1 preparation. So I can get to the Unit 1 preparation videos, but not inside the homework. So these I can get.
That's good to know. So maybe that's what you were clicking on. Maybe you were going in the modules. Maybe you clicked on Unit 1 homework. And then, oh yeah, I can see, look at that. They're all broken. That's weird.
Yeah, so the help desk was saying is the way it was set up for the instructors, the professors' access, not the students' access.
Yeah, well, it's broken for even me, because if I click on it, it says it's unavailable. So it's almost like just the links are dead, like they moved the videos.
Mhm.
So just try, maybe that's it. Try and go back to the modules and click on the unit 1 preparation. I wonder if maybe it's bad in the other course, because that's H1. Let's see, H2 modules, unit 1. Yep, they're all there. But assignments, unit 1, they're all missing. Yeah, so it looks like it's the same in both classes. Just go through the prep and not the homework, and it hopefully should work for you. But again, they're not important if you can't get them to work at all.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Anything else? From anybody?
Very
Okay.
good. Thank you.
Yep. We'll see you guys on Monday.
Thank you. This was really helpful. Thank you so much.
Oh, I'm glad. See you Monday.